Hi everyone, Michael McVety, president of Red Fortress Property Management, back here with you to cover an interesting thing that happened not even 2 weeks ago. And I wanted to cover it again. I'm Michael, president of the company. I'm a property manager of 30 years and a local landlord here in the Fort Myers, Southwest Florida area of 30 years as well. So it was really interesting. There was a memo that was released on emotional support animals by the Fair Housing office, and I wanted to go over that and how it affects us basically. And listen, first of all, I'm not an attorney. Okay, so get that, out of your heads here. So I'm not giving you legal counsel, but when I read through the actual document, there were some pretty interesting things in there. So let's talk a bit about what happened. So basically, on May 22nd, 2 weeks ago, the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office, okay, so let's call them Fair Housing Office from now on, just to shorten it. But the Fair Housing Office sent a memo from the Assistant Secretary Craig Trainer to the Office of Enforcement for Fair Housing. And it said that, listen, as fair housing, we have to prioritize our limited enforcement resources. Now, this dates back to an executive order from President Trump in February 19th of 2025 that he asked federal agencies to review their enforcement activities to do the best reading of the statute and basically to be more efficient and effective in their enforcement. So this is what I suppose Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office did. And what they found was something that they've been talking about for a little while, that emotional support animals constituted over 20% of fair housing complaints. Okay, so emotional support animals, not to be confused with service animals, emotional support animals, they had over 20% of the fair housing complaints dealt with emotional support animals. And what they said basically was, effective immediately from this memo, fair housing will find reasonable cause and recommend charges only for those cases involving trained animals to provide service related assistance. So, what they're talking about is no longer enforcing certain things about emotional support animals. So, let's get into the background real quickly and what they have to say. All right. So, the Fair Housing issued a guidance in January 28 of 2020. And they were talking about assessing having an animal as a reasonable accommodation for a disability. And they said in that memo, and I quote, emotional support as well as trained service animals are not pets. Okay. And this was an update from a previous memo in 2013 from the Fair Housing. And 6 years after this guidance, what was happening is there was a lot of confusion towards how we accommodate these types of wishes. So there were two issues that they noted. One was regarding the area of disability, right? So as a property manager or landlord, we're not supposed to be asking personal health information. There's HIPAA and all kinds of laws with that. So that was one area. And then also, what was reasonable accommodation with regards not to service animals, but emotional support animals. So in other words, if somebody said, I have a disability and I need these six large dogs as emotional support animals, was that considered reasonable accommodation or not? And that's what the issue was. And as this memo said 2 weeks ago, instead of kind of trying to clarify this, an entire industry has emerged to convert pets into emotional support animals. So people that had pets that were maybe trying to get around, certain regulations and rules, like community rules that you're not allowed to have pets, or pet fees or pet rent or deposits and all that stuff, they were saying that this pet is actually an emotional support animal. Now, not everybody did that, but certainly people always try to go around the rules. And what they were saying is, again, housing providers that deny a request to waive pet policies for untrained emotional support animals or ask reasonable follow-up questions risk a fair housing complaint and a prolonged investigation despite compliance with HUD guidance. So they were saying, listen, there's too much gray area here. I'm reading directly from the memo. So what changed? So prior to 2023, some courts applied the Department of Public Housing rules to private housing providers. They did in 2009 and 2014 as per this memo. And what started to happen was, as time went on, some of the federal courts started to say, well, wait, we don't agree with some of these rulings, and so they started to look at changing them. And this is what happened 2 weeks ago, where they said, I permanently rescinding the Fair Housing 2020 notice regarding service animals and the 2013 notice that preceded it. And they were commenting in this memo that these policies were never put through a public notice. They were never put through a comment process, which is normal for when you're trying to create public policy. And they said that obviously that never happened. And they said that the fair housing no longer expects housing providers to categorically extend accommodations for trained assistance animals to untrained emotional support animals. So they're saying, listen, there's now, just like the American Disabilities Act, they talked about service animals, they talked about the importance of reasonable accommodations. We all follow that. But these emotional service animals were a gray area. And they're basically saying we can't apply the same standards to emotional support animals as um, service animals. So, what now? So, first of all, very, very important to understand this memo was not law. It can be changed. So, just like they said in 2020 and 2013, I'm rescinding those things. Here's what we're going to do right now. Obviously, they can change it again. Okay. So, just keep that in mind. It's a memo, it's not law, but it's kind of an interesting directive of what they're saying. Okay. And first of all, nothing that was done through this memo means that they take away a person's right to seek private action through the courts, whether it's at a federal or state level, regarding discrimination. Okay, so nothing's changed there, just maybe that the enforcement of federal housing or fair housing uh, won't continue to look at emotional support animals the same way. Okay, also, they've commented the fact that HUD regulations for animal related housing or reasonable accommodations haven't been updated for 35 years regarding private housing. So they're saying, listen, this is long overdue. We have to get this under control. And they said that in the future, they're looking for our feedback, public feedback from landlords, renters, property managers, that sort of thing. I don't know when it's going to happen, but as a professional property manager, I definitely want to give my advice on that because we want to be clear. We want to make sure that the rules are good for people and that if they need certain support, emotionally, that sort of thing, or with a disability, that they should be able to receive it. And if they don't have a disability, listen, please stop. Now, for those that don't know, last year it got so bad, the fraud towards emotional support animals was so rampant that the state of Florida passed Florida statutes 817265. I hope I got the number right. And it talked about knowingly and willfully misrepresenting yourself as having a disability or disability related need for an emotional support animal is a criminal offense. It's a second degree misdemeanor. So it got so bad that the state of Florida even themselves said, hey, listen, guys, stop this. We have to start putting limits on it because the fraud is rampant. Okay. So I just wanted to give you a couple of quick notes on this. Again, I'm Michael with Red Fortress Property Management. If you have any questions or email, feel free to email me or contact me. It's a pretty important decision or memo that's coming down. I look forward to doing some public um, research and giving them feedback on what they should be doing, in my humble opinion, and you guys should be as well. So have a great day. I hope this is very helpful, and we'll see you next time with another update.